I have 200 orchids at this point, and sometimes I wonder what happened, but I mean, I can clearly tell you that a couple of years ago, I got a bunch of seedlings, and I got a couple of bag babies. So 3 years ago, I got 4 bag babies. I have 3 that I'm going to show you, one here, one over there, and I have another one here. They're no longer babies. They've grown really well. So in today's video, I'm going to share what I've learned about growing bag babies, what to expect, how to care for them, and some precautions as well. I was inspired to make this video because I saw a video from Hillbilly Orchids that went to get some bag babies, and she also did a 10-year update on one of her bag babies. So check out her channel if you want to see more. But I find that these are a good way to expand your collection. So let's jump right in and I will tell you more about bag babies. So what are bag babies? So they're packaged orchids. They usually come in a little bag. They're pre-packaged. You usually get them in 2 different sizes, 2 inches or 4 inches. They usually sell them in the big box hardware stores and usually like Lowe's. I've heard folks find them in Home Depot. They unfortunately don't have them here in New York. I got these bag babies from a friend down south, and she shipped them to me because she told me that there were so many and they were just dying off because the employees just weren't watering them. So that's a point that we'll get to later. But typically you can find these down south. I know that Hillbilly Orchids is out in West Virginia. She's able to find them by her. They're not available typically from what I've seen here in New York, New Jersey. I haven't found them. If you have, let me know down below. But I find that a lot of folks down in the southeast or like in or down a little further south than Pennsylvania, they're usually able to find them, which is amazing. They're economical. The 2-inch pots are about $10, and then the 4-inch pots are about $17 nowadays. I got these orchids from 4-inch pots, and they were near blooming size. So when you get the 2-inch pots, they're near blooming size, and that you can expect them to bloom within 1 to 2 years. And then with the 4-inch pots, they're expected to bloom between 1 to 1.5 years. I find that all of them bloom for me within that time frame except for one. So I'll get into those shortly. None of these orchids are sold in bloom. As I said, they're younger. They're seedlings. The ones that are in 2-inch pots are going to be a little bit more challenging to grow if you're a new grower than ones that are in 4-inch pots. So if you're a new grower, I suggest that you stick with some of the larger ones. If you're more experienced, of course, you can go with the smaller ones. The reason for that is the smaller an orchid is, the easier it is to kill it. So let's say you neglect it for a couple of weeks, it's hard for those to come back. Whereas a larger, more vigorous orchid, it's more forgiving to being neglected or too much light or no light or too little light, that sort of thing. So that's just something to keep in mind. Some tips that I can give you for bag babies is to, when you get them, just look at them really well. Take them out of, maybe not take them out of their pots, but see if the media is very wet or completely bone dry. A lot of times these orchids go into the big box stores and sometimes they're neglected. So you don't know how long they've been at the store. So they could be in really good shape. These were in good shape. Or they could be in not so good shape. So you have to know whether they've been watered, which you could kind of tell by the media, or if they're completely bone dry, and then you want to hydrate right away or let them dry out right away. So I say that sometimes it's hit or miss. It's like a great thing that you can get these for cheap, but once they hit the big box stores, they're either well taken care of or neglected. So you don't have any control over that. They're not in an orchid nursery. I would let them adapt to your environment before repotting. That's what I do with orchids that I get from orchid nurseries. They're coming from a greenhouse, very humid conditions, to my indoor dry conditions. So I give them some time to adapt, and then I repot them when I see new roots. That's just me. If you're experienced, of course, you could do whatever works best for you. But I would give them some time to acclimate and wait for some new roots to push out before repotting. That's just me. A lot of these are cattleyas, so I would just be more mindful of that. And sometimes Cattleyas can be sensitive to repotting and you don't want to set it back. So I unboxed these with you guys back in November of 2021. It's almost been 3 years. And they were in good shape when I got them. My friend gave them to me because she told me that when Lowe's got a shipment last time, a lot of them were neglected, and every time she'd return, they were there and no one would water them and they would die off. So she felt kind of bad, and she's like, hey, do you want any bag babies? And I was like, yeah, we don't have these here in New York. So I purchased 4. They were in good shape when they arrived. So Lowe's got a new shipment. She told me about it, and then she shipped them to me. They were all in 4-inch pots. None of them were in bloom, of course, but they looked in really good shape. So let me show you the ones that I got. Okay, so the first orchid that I got was a cross between the Cattleya Irene Finney and the Cattleya Mosier. So that one was in really good shape when I got it. It had a new growth coming in. It looked like it was set, but one thing that I did that I regret just over time in my collection is that I transitioned these into a semi-hydro setup. It's in a kind of like a modified semi-hydro setup. I found that over time, some of my orchids didn't like it, so some of them declined. Some of them enjoy it, but not all of them do. So I'm slowly transitioning things out of it. These I have not transitioned out yet, anything in these large 7-inch pots, but the Cattleya was in really good shape when I got it. It grew and then it slowed down and then it just started getting wrinkled. I don't know if it's because of the grow method or if it had some sort of disease or anything, but it just stopped pushing out new growths. And everything else was growing. These were all growing. So I just decided to get rid of it. It was clear it was going to die. So it was unfortunate, but it was my only casualty of the bunch. But it was in really good shape and started declining maybe about 1.5 years ago. So it was growing up until, so it grew for 1.5 years. So it happens. It didn't give me trouble early on. Okay. The next orchid that I'm going to show you is the Cattleya Jackie Bright. This one bloomed true to their word. So it took about 1.5 years to bloom. It bloomed for me for the first time last June. It gave me 4 spikes and lots of flowers. It was so beautiful. It bloomed again for me this April. I find that as I've had it, it's only bloomed once a year, but when it does bloom, it gives me really nice blooms. I was told it was fragrant, but mine isn't fragrant. And because it only blooms like once a year, I'm considering what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I'll give it away. I don't know. I do love the flowers on this one, but I feel like if an orchid isn't giving me really strong fragrance and if it doesn't bloom at least twice a year, it's taking up real estate in my collection. So I kind of think about it. If I ever want to add anything else, I usually get rid of something, and it's usually something that's not fragrant or not as vigorous. So it's beautiful, but I kind of have that in the back of my mind every time it blooms once a year. But anyway, that one is a really nice one. Cattleya Jackie Bright, vigorous, grown very well. And as you can see, it's no longer a baby. So the next one I have is very vigorous. It is the BC Attagirl, and this one is a cross between the Richard Mueller, and it's a cross between the Cattleya triumphans. It is one of my biggest Richard Mueller hybrids. It is also one of my most vigorous orchids. So I'm really happy with this. It is actually quite tall compared to a lot of orchids in my collection, and that is from the Cattleya triumphans. Yeah, I would say this is more of a standard sized Cattleya. A lot bigger. I did take this out and my cat ate some of the leaves, which is very annoying. But on the other end of the spectrum, compared to the Jackie Bright, this one blooms multiple times a year. If you guys want to see a video on very vigorous orchids, check out this link right here. This one came up in it. My only gripe with it is that it's a little bigger than my others, but that's not even a gripe. I'm just my only negative. But there's all positives for this one. This one took 1 year to bloom. True to the word of the bag baby, it bloomed when they said it would. It bloomed for the first time in November of 2022. So it took 1 year to bloom. And It had a new growth when it began, so I was able to repot this quickly because I saw new roots right away. It was in really good shape, and it's probably tripled in size since I've received it. This orchid blooms 3 to 4 times per year. It was gonna bloom again, but my cat ate the buds, so it's like starting to really hit its stride, and then my cat literally ate the buds off of it, which was so annoying, and then she ate that. But yes, I'm getting her cat grass so that she could leave my plants alone, as you guys have all suggested. My cat is just something. I used to have cat grass for her and she would still eat the orchids, so maybe it's just a matter of getting her more cat grass. We'll figure it out, but it's okay. This is a good one. Blooms 3 to 4 times a year. It is because of the Richard Mueller. I have no complaints on this. Okay, the next one is the Epilaleocatlia Golden Sunburst, which is this one right here. This is growing really nicely. It's so vigorous. It has a couple of new growths coming in. One has a sheath, I want to say, somewhere in here. I thought I saw a sheath. I don't see a sheath. But I expect it to bloom this year. I've had it for 3 years, so I'm expecting blooms. This is the only one that hasn't bloomed aside from the one that died. I don't really have much to say. It's getting a lot of light, so I've noticed some spotting at the very top where it's getting too much light. But I fully expect it to bloom this time. It's putting on a lot of growths. It did have thrips last year. Thankfully, I took care of it. Very minimal damage. Actually, all of these had thrips at some point, but I was able to treat it and get rid of it. Minimal damage, but you could definitely see it on their flowers, on the leaves. They are the worst. Thankfully, I've taken care of all of that. But this is the only one that didn't grow for me, so I will show you the flowers when they bloom. But in terms of vigor, very vigorous, growing nicely in this semi-hydro setup, and hopefully I will share some blooms towards the end of the summer. I like these bag babies. As I said, if you're a beginner, try to get the 4-inch pots. And then as you're more experienced, you could get the 2-inch pots. These are really good ways to expand your collection. With that said, they do get way bigger. So when you get something kind of small, they can, they're going to triple, quadruple, quintuple in size on you, and you're going to just need more space. So I say this with experience as someone who started with a lot of seedlings. I've had to get multiple shelves just because something that was in a 2-inch pot, when they go into a 7-inch pot and spread, it's way more space. So between the bag babies and I would say seedlings that I've gotten from Hawaii, I can make another separate video on that. Those are the biggest ways that I've grown this collection, and I'm very happy with how they've done. No issues, but I think I started off with really good plants. So if you get bag babies, make sure you check them out. They could have been neglected. Not everybody in these department stores know how to take care of orchids, so it's par for the course. So either you'll do really well with them or not so well if they've been neglected. And seedlings, once they're neglected, they tend to have a harder time. 4-inch pot is definitely better than the 2-inch pot. So if you guys want to try these, bag babies, I think they're a great way to expand your collection. I pretty much have to get everything online unless I go to White Plains. There's White Plains Orchids, which has a pretty good selection, but I don't get there too often. So most of these are from online, from friends, divisions. These came from a friend that has access to bag babies. I also get seedlings from Hawaii. I can make a separate video on that. These are all excellent ways to expand the collection. And anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.